Hey there, Squirrel Army! Today we're doing a deck tech on Elenda and Azor. You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing. Alright, so it's a 6 mana 6/6 with Flying and Ward 2. That's pretty nice. When attacks, pay X and our commander's colours, white, blue, black. And if we do, we draw X cards. So that's okay to draw a few cards. You get that sort of pseudo effect of what's his name, the Azor commander or whatever he's called. Not that amazing, but still not too bad. At the beginning of each end step, you may pay 4 life, and if you do, you create a number of 1/1 black vampire knight creature tokens with lifelink equal to the number of cards you've drawn this turn. So we want to draw as many cards as what we can on our opponent's turns, and we also kind of want to gain some life, I feel. Our commander, I don't think we're going to, we might activate its ability sometimes, but honestly, I feel like we want getting the card draws effects and whatnot to get these free vampires and things like that. We might look at some token doubler sort of effects as well to just get more out of that. And some token buffs, etc. Things like that, or things that just change our tokens into being better tokens and whatnot. So those things would be pretty good. They are in our colors, so that's well worth thinking about. It is a slower commander at 6 mana already, so I would think that you're not going to have much time on the turn that you play it to sink mana into its ability. And if you do, you're not drawing very many cards, because at that point you'll be at 9 mana and whatnot. So I don't know about that, but it is only when it attacks, I guess. So, and then you probably wouldn't be attacking with it at that point anyway, so because it wouldn't have haste, so that wouldn't make much sense, I don't think, but that is what it is. But anyway, yeah, I think that there's a few things that I'm immediately thinking of. But yeah, you guys have voted for this commander to see this one. This one was the most popular out of the commanders from the sub-commanders in the commander decks that people wanted to see. So yeah, I'll get along and build a list for this one. And I will get to the other ones eventually. Like I say, it's a process, so do bear with me as much as you can, because I will try to get through them, and I will get to try to do some of the ones from the set as well, or from the commander set or whatever as well, if you guys want to see them. I'll put a couple polls up on the channel so you can go and vote and tell me which ones you want to see, but nevertheless, I will get along building this one. Alright, so now here we are, having a look at the finished list. And I will say again, for those people who are not too interested in me reading through the cards and explaining all the cards and whatnot and all of that sort of stuff, if you just want to see what I've done and what I've put together here for this commander's deck list, check out the deck list in the comments there below. It'll be there for you to find what I've done and what I've put together if you just want to check it out, see what's there. Print out your proxies, do whatever you want to do, edit it, change it, whatever. So yeah, you can do that and figure it out for yourself if you're not too interested, or if you think you've got a fairly good grasp of things. But for those people who don't, I'm here to try to just go through it as quickly as we can. $540, or nearly $40. Not a very budget list, unfortunately, but I did go low on the lands too, so I'm a little bit with that, but it is what it is when you build some of these decks. It's very hard to make a budget list, especially for me. I'm terrible at making budget lists, but anyway, It is what it is. I'm not going to talk about the lands because there's nothing here. Like a bunch of basics, Command Tower and Exotic Orchard. There's nothing here to talk about. So it's a very budget list. Anyone could make a better budget mana base or a better mana base than this. Probably not on a budget, but again, it's very tough for the most part. And again, if you guys want to figure out why I've got, 14 planes or whatever it is, more planes and swamps or whatever it is, you always should check out this percentage thing on any of your decks. I found that white was the highest percent, then black, and then blue. So I was like, well, that makes sense. So let's just go with mostly white, mostly black, then black, and then blue. So that's just how it worked out. I don't want to go through the instance, really, because it's all just really good removal spells that I don't think we really need to cover too much. I should have actually put in a couple of board wipes here somewhere. So I haven't even got any sorceries to talk about. But yeah, I would definitely try to put in some board wipes here, but I don't know what I'd cut at this point, so it is what it is. It was kind of a tight list to a degree as well. Looks like Artifacts is the smallest, so we'll go through Artifacts first. El Hamrat's Archive, we gain life, we gain twice as much life. If we draw a card, we draw twice as many cards. As long as it's not during our upkeep or whatever, blah, 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 or during our draw step, whatever. That is really good. It is 5 mana, but it is really good, especially when we're drawing cards on our opponent's turns. We need to be able to draw extra cards on our opponent's turns so that we can make more tokens and be able to pay more life. And when we gain life, we need to be gaining so much life that we can pay all this life. So it's just well worth it. I'm not going to talk about the mana rocks like Arcane Signet too much because they're just good mana rocks and whatnot in here. Biden Athasa, it does only mostly work for the card draw effect on our turn, but again, that's still fine. We'll still take that. We still want this sort of card draw, and it can force our opponents to attack people when they're not really willing to attack, and with creatures that they're not really willing to attack with. Plus, again, just the card draw that we need is really useful, so yeah, it's really well worthwhile. Also, I've got a couple of these equipments in here that go and fetch basic lands and whatnot. So those are really good because, again, we've got a lot of basics, so they'll ramp us pretty quick at certain points. So that's really useful, even though it doesn't really synergize with very much that's honestly in the deck and whatnot. Well of Lost Dreams, when we gain life, we can pay X, where X is the, or less than the amount of life we gained, and if we do, we draw X cards. So we can just keep getting more and more cards for the amount of life we've gained and just cycle through most of our deck. I was wondering how we kind of win with this deck, though I don't want to go down the route of Thassa's Oracle or Labman or Jace or that sort of stuff. I'm sure you could certainly do that sort of thing. So it's up to you guys, but I wanted to go down the tokens route and just draw a whole bunch of cards. So that's what I did. Anointed Procession, we get more tokens. That's really good for us. Consul of the Clouds, it makes our opponent's stuff enter tapped, or at least their creatures, and when they do enter, we gain life. So that really helps us out to slow down our opponents because we are a pretty slow deck. We've got to get our commander out at 6 before our deck really turns on. Like, not that we can't do anything, but just that we have to really wait till our commander's out to really do a whole lot of what our deck really wants to do. So we really have to slow people down, and once we've got it out there and whatnot with our commander, it really helps us out because we can easily pay more life when we gain more life again. So useful. Blind Obedience, same sort of thing. It has Extort as well, so when we cast spells, we can play for Extort to drain our opponents. So that's pretty useful as well. It also makes our opponent's artifacts enter tapped, so that's pretty useful, especially if people are playing non-green decks. Though some people play mana rocks and some artifacts in green as well, so it can be very useful. Cathar's Crusade, we need stuff to buff up our tokens that we're making. We're not just going to make these tokens for no reason. We need them to try to win us the game in some way, or rather. They do have lifelink, so that does help us out with our strategy, but again, buffing our things up is well worth our time. So we'll just do more damage. Coastal Piracy is probably one of the worst card draw effects in the deck, but it's still pretty darn good. We do need that card draw and card advantage, so just put it in there, I think. It's fine. Dawn of Hope, we are getting a few things that gain us life, so I do think it's worth our time to be able to pay 2 mana to draw cards, and it can make lifelink soldiers for us, which can do stuff for us, mostly gaining life for us, so we can keep the train going on the tracks mostly, but still. Divine Visitation, we have got to change what we're doing. We can't just be making these piddly 1/1s, even if we make 50 of them. We need to be able to buff those things or change them into things that have very high power and high evasion. So this is well worth our time to at least think about in this deck, and any deck that's making tokens would want this card, I think, but yeah. We've got the Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood combo in here. Not that we've got any tutors to get them, so it's not like the best thing in the world, but it's very powerful. They're both powerful in their own respect, so we don't really need to be comboing with them to be good. They'll do a lot of work for us no matter what we have out for the most part, because we will be gaining life and we will be dealing damage to our opponents, so therefore we'll be gaining life from doing that damage to our opponents, so they both can really help us out. Kindred Discovery, we're not mono knights or whatever, but we are making a lot of knights with our commander's ability, and our commander is a knight, so I do think it is still well worth our time to do this. Plus, again, we can, when we do this, we'll draw extra cards during our opponent's turn when we pay 4 life, because those tokens will enter. So can just draw us extra cards there. The charge, I like it for the life drain effect. And like, again, not that we have a huge amount of knights in our deck, but not like we don't have any knights in our deck. We do have some. So the ability to get back all of our knights isn't irrelevant sometimes. And yeah, that's not too bad. It is a bit overcosted, but still. Reconnaissance mission's not too bad. We can cycle it away for 2 if we really don't need it. Or, again, we've got an effect that draws us cards when our creatures hit. So that's pretty useful. Ristic Study, if people don't pay the 1, we draw a card. That's really useful. Draws us a lot of cards a lot of the time. Sanguine Bond, as I said, that's in here. Teferis Age's Insight. If we draw 1 card, except for the card we draw during our draw step, we draw 2 cards instead. Just drawing more cards. We need to draw a lot of cards, get a lot of card advantage. Since we are already doing a lot of shenanigans and whatnot, this is sort of the same, the idea of the route going. Same with Thought Reflection. We need to draw more cards so that we can do more effects in what we're doing. The Archivist of Ogma, whenever our opponent's tutor, we gain a life and we draw a card. Both of those things are very good. We want the life to be able to pay life. We want to draw cards so that we can, again, get more tokens to populate our battlefield. So, useful there. The Vampire, when we gain life, each opponent loses a life. Pretty useful for us. The Sphinx, whenever an opponent draws a card, we can draw 2 cards. This can get really silly, but it's just so powerful because, again, we can draw those cards on our opponent's turns, which means we've already drawn at least a couple of cards for their draw step, which means we can get those, at least a couple of those knights on their turn. The Emissary is the same thing as the Vampire, mostly, except it also gains us life as well, I believe. So that really... it's only during our upkeep. well, that's alright. It's still alright because it's still a pretty decent thing that helps us gain life and helps us ping our opponents to death slowly. The Drog Skull, when we gain life, we just draw cards, and it's a flying double strike life linker, so that's pretty darn powerful. The Core, Sadistic Pilgrim. When our creatures ETB, we gain life. When our creatures die, our opponents lose life. So that's pretty darn useful. Does two good things that we want to do. The Epicure of Blood, it's very much the same as the Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood sort of thing. It combos with those sorts of things as well. So when we gain life, our opponents lose life. So that's quite strong, can do quite a lot for us. The Cavalry, like I said, we don't have 0 knights in the deck, but we don't have a million knights in the deck. But the knights that we do make from our commander's effect will be well enough, probably, for this to be well effective to get additional counters on all of our creatures and just buff them up slowly throughout the rest of the game. Can be really good still in the early parts of the game because it does have Menace and Lifelink, so those two things aren't too bad. And even if we don't have a commander, still all right. Yawgmoth's Praetor, if we hit our opponents or if our opponents hit our other opponents, they can pay their life to draw a card. And we can do other things with it, but honestly, that's the main thing that it's here for. It is a political tool in some ways for our opponents to be like, oh, well, we won't hit you. We'll hit this other person because we'll draw cards and whatnot. So they kind of do our work for us, so it really helps us out. The Puppeteer, when we draw our second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. Probably not the best one, probably one of the worst ones here. Oh, and if it dies, we return another creature with mana value 3 or less from the grave to the battlefield. But yeah, still, it's not the most amazing one. It's probably the one that you could most easily cut from this list to add something else. But yeah, it's not terrible, I don't think. Still alright. The Hoof Breeds. This is probably one of the best evasive cards that we can put, or mass evasive cards that we can put in this deck for what we're trying to do. Gives all of our knights basically unblockable because no one basically plays horsemanship. So that's really, really useful. The Petition, when we gain life, or at the beginning of our end step, if we've gained 3 or more life, each opponent loses 3 life. So again, punishing our opponents for, our own synergies that we're doing. The Cumball, if an opponent casts a non-creature spell, they lose 2 life and we gain 2 life, so again, fairly useful. The Bright Priest, whenever we gain life, each opponent loses life, so that's, again, very powerful for us because we're going to gain a bunch of life. The Pilferer, at the beginning of each end step, if we gain life, we can pay 2, and if we do, draw a card. So again, we've got a lot of those life gain effects that we want to do. Mondak, double our tokens. That's really useful. And it can become indestructible. So that's really useful. And there's not very many ways to move the indestructible counters, but of course you could get those things that do move the indestructible counter. They're quite useful with this because you make your whole board basically indestructible. Notion Thief. If an opponent draws a card, except for the first one they draw, they skip that draw and instead we draw a card. Actually, I was thinking Alms Collector should go in here as well. So that's a really good card for us, and whatnot. So both of these two cards, Alms Collector and this, are pretty darn good. It just slows our opponents down and whatnot so that we can do our shenanigans. Oloro, he's usually the face of these sort of style of decks. Not that he couldn't be the face of this deck, but it would definitely change a lot of what the deck's trying to do. Beginning of the upkeep, we gain 2 life. Whenever we gain life, we can pay 1, and if we do, we draw a card and each opponent loses life. So that's really useful. We're getting these extra life, and we can weaponize some of our life gain and whatnot as well. So, and we can even draw cards off of it again, so that's really useful. Ornithopter here for mana. The Augur of Agonies, when we draw a card and the opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So with all of our life gaining shenanigans that are also going on here, this will trigger so many other things and whatnot that it's well worth our time. And again, when we get to draw those cards, we'll be getting more life to be able to pay more life to get more tokens and whatnot. So well worth our time, I believe. The Sheldred, when we draw cards, we gain life. When our opponents draw cards, they lose life. So again, it punishes our opponents and it helps us. And it helps us in the strategy that we really want. So really useful. We've got both of the Soul Warden or the Soul Sisters here. I don't know whether there's any other ones, but hopefully we've got as many of them as we can. But they all basically just gain us life when our creatures enter. Also, a Suture Priest does the same sort of thing, but it also makes our opponents lose life when they play creatures or when creatures enter their field. So, can be very powerful sorts of effects. Twilight Prophet, beginning of the upkeep, we have the city's, if we have the city's blessing, so if we have 10 or more permanents, we reveal the top card of our library, put it into our hand, and each opponent loses X life, where X is the mana value of the card, and we also gain that much life. So very, very powerful, does a lot of damage to our opponents and gives us a lot of life, and gives us some additional card advantage as well. Temna, beginning of our post-combat main phase, we can pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that we dealt combat damage to this turn, and we can draw X cards. So again, like, we can just gain a whole lot of life during our turn, pay a whole bunch of life, or pay 3 life to draw 3 cards, and again, make 3 more nights. So that's really well worth our time to do, which again will have lifelink and whatnot, so that will help us out. The Sengir, Flying and Death Touch and lifelink, all those things are nice, but whenever we activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, if we pay the life to activate that ability, we can basically copy it and choose new targets for the copy. So when we pay life with our commander to make those tokens for the number of cards we've drawn, we just essentially double that effect. We do have to pay the life, but it's well worth it to get more knights and to do more of what we're trying to do. Veto, when we gain life, target opponent loses that much life, and we can give our creatures lifelink until end of turn. It is a bit of a big mana gate to get that lifelink on our creatures, but it can be very well worth it, even though we're making a lot of knights that have lifelink and whatnot. But just the gaining life and target opponent loses life is kind of well worth it as well. So a lot of this card does a lot of what we want to do. Which of the Moors, beginning of the end step, if we gain life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature and we turn a creature from our graveyard to our hand. So all of that's pretty darn useful for what we're trying to do. And if we lose something important, again, we can just get it back eventually. So that is well worth our time as well. And that is the list here for this deck. You guys can always tell me what you think. Write your thoughts down there in the comments below. And hope you've enjoyed and hope that you will join me again in the next one.